Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Joan Johnson, your city librarian. Welcome to Milwaukee Public Library's celebration of the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Under more typical circumstances, we would be gathering for a vibrant in-person event at the branch of the Milwaukee Public Library that is named for Dr. King. But to ensure everyone's safety during this ongoing pandemic, we are together online. This is a day for reflection and celebration of the work and the legacy that Dr. King left for our community. Now, more than ever, as we look back on the events of the last year, we see we have much more work to do. We must fight to combat the racial inequities brought to the light by the COVID pandemic. We must harness the will and the momentum to dismantle systemic racism and alleviate the disparities caused by it. At Milwaukee Public Library, we work to address these disparities. Our mission is to help our patrons read, learn, and connect for books and resources and for each other and our community. And that is what today is all about, even if we can't gather in person. I want to thank Joy Zanders and Brett Rowing and their teams for all their hard work today and every day, but especially for pivoting and making sure today was just as special. I thank you for bringing the celebration to our community. I also want to thank Milwaukee Public Library Foundation for providing the funding to make the special programming today possible. Now it is my pleasure to introduce Mayor Tom Barrett.
Hi, I'm Mayor Tom Barrett, and I am so pleased that the Milwaukee Public Library has been able to continue its annual Martin Luther King Day celebration with virtual programming this year. This event continues to be a wonderful opportunity for us all to join together to remember Dr. King's legacy. The theme of this Martin Luther King Day is "Injustice Anywhere is a Threat to Justice Everywhere." These words of Dr. King's are just as true today as they were when he spoke them. During his lifetime, Dr. King worked alongside people of all ages, races, and backgrounds to encourage all Americans to work together to strengthen communities, reduce poverty, and acknowledge dignity and respect for all. His efforts continue today. We are still working as a nation and locally as a community to provide equity and inclusion for all Americans. After you hear the messages and powerful stories from the speakers here today, I want to challenge everyone to think about how you can personally take action in our community to bring about the changes you want to see. We all want to live in a world that Dr. King envisioned for us, a world of peace, not violence, prosperity, not unemployment, and hope, not despair. As Dr. King wrote so eloquently in his letter from a Birmingham jail, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects us all indirectly.
Good afternoon. I am Alderwoman Milele A. Cogs, and I have both the pleasure and the honor of representing the 6th Automatic District, and I am so happy to be with you all here today to celebrate Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. You know, as we reflect on this day, on the works and deeds of Dr. King, I think that we cannot deny the level of progress that has been made, both for justice, civil rights, and equality through all of the struggle and all of the fight of Dr. King and so many that stood side by side with him. But if you are like I and you read the papers and you watch the news, you recognize that our fight for justice and civil rights is not over. So for those of us who are continuing the fight, there are lessons to be learned by the work of Dr. King. There is a level of respect, reverence, and passion for people that he exhibited throughout the daily fight that he had for civil rights that is exemplified in a small poem that I want to share with you all today. The poem is entitled "A Dream Can Come True" by Anonymous. Martin Luther King had a dream for people everywhere. He wanted them to get along and show how much they care by helping one another and by always being fair. So remember Martin Luther King and help his dream come true by always treating others as you'd want them to treat you. Happy MLK Day.
Well, welcome to our first virtual celebration. Thank you, Mayor Barrett and Alderwoman Cox, for welcoming the audience. I just really appreciate everyone's support as we work through our first virtual celebration for Martin Luther King Day 2021. My name is Joy Zanders. This program is brought to you by the Milwaukee Public Library Foundation. Special thanks to our director, Joan Johnson, and our administrative team, who's been very supportive of our efforts. Let's get started with our featured program today. Meet artist Charly Palmer. Hi, Charly. Thank you for agreeing to participate in our celebration this year. Can you tell me a little bit about your background and your connection to Milwaukee?
Okay, so it's a pleasure to be here and to talk to my people from Milwaukee and the Milwaukee City Libraries. I was born in Fayette, Alabama, but we moved to Milwaukee in 1968. And so I was raised in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So I went to grade school, middle school, high school in Milwaukee. And so I didn't leave Milwaukee until after I graduated from high school, which was Custer High School in 1978. So since that time, I've lived in Chicago. I went to Chicago to further my education. So I went to the Art Institute of Chicago, as well as the American Academy of Art, both of them in the Chicago area. After completing that, I was a professional artist for several years in Chicago before I moved back to Milwaukee for a brief time. I think I was back in Milwaukee for about 6 years before I moved to Atlanta, Georgia. And so Atlanta, Georgia has been my home now for over 25 years. And in fact, it's the longest place. I've lived in Atlanta longer than I've ever lived anywhere.
Awesome. I bet the weather in Atlanta is much cozier than the weather in Milwaukee.
Yeah, that was one of the reasons I moved. I like good weather. I like warm weather. Cold weather kind of like makes it interferes with my creativity. That's what I'm going to say.
I like that. So how did you know that art was your calling? Was there a defining moment for you?
That's a very good question. One of the things that you probably don't know, Joy, but you probably do, is that all of my brothers have some artistic talent, including my very youngest one, R.B. Walker. And so I didn't think it was anything that was very serious. I thought it was something that everybody did. We were, to some degree, kind of competitive, but we were also somewhat competitive athletically. But when it came to my art, and my mom would have acknowledged that I seemed to have had a little bit more of a commitment and more of a dedication to it. And I think that's the difference. And I think that's always the difference when you find your passion, is that you are committed to it. And I've been committed to it from the moment I realized that was what I wanted to do.
So tell me the truth. Who was the worst in the family? Who got the most trouble?
The worst when it came to art, or
No,
who
got in the household with your brothers and sisters? Who got in the most trouble?
What's funny? It's like the baby is my little brother, Aubrey. And so what's so funny about that is that he was a different age. He was 10. The closest age was 10 years old. That was my youngest sister. And then he came, then. And so he got all the attention. He got very spoiled. He was used to his attention, but he was also very much loved and protected by all of us. So he got into a lot of trouble, but I think we all managed to get into enough trouble.
It's so funny. Every day I pass by the house that you grew up in, and I just think so much talent grew out of that household right there on,
Mhm.
what is it, 36, 37th and Capitol. And
37 Capital. Yep.
yeah, I'm so amazed at your success. Um, so tell me, what kind of messages are conveyed through your art?
So there's always been a commitment to African American history. And it's always been very important to me. In fact, that was the other passion. I think that like people are asked when they pursue a profession, like, what would you have chosen to do if you were not whatever that chosen profession is? And quite honestly, for me, I think I would have been a history teacher. I've always been intrigued and fascinated with history. And so, what I was able to do early on in my career is combine both. So, I was able to combine my love for history with my love for art. And the transition or shift in my career came when I started to focus on the journey of African American history from the Middle Passage, or from Africa actually, through the Middle Passage, through the Civil War and Reconstruction and the Civil Rights Movement to today. And so it was combining both interests that led me to, to really find what was most successful for me.
Wonderful. Um, so our theme for our program this year is injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And I know you're a
Mhm.
history buff. So can you kind of tell me, what does that quote mean to you? What kind of thoughts do you have around that quote?
That quote, and I look at, like, I was looking this morning at some Martin Luther King quotes. And I think the thing that he emphasized over and over again is the desire to remain quiet. And so when you see injustice and when you see bad behavior, you have a choice. You can either be a part of it, but to remain silent is actually being a part of it. So when you see someone speak out illly of civil rights or racism, if you don't say something, you're supporting their ideas. And so I think that it becomes very important to speak your mind. I think that one of the things that I addressed early on, or not early on, in the last couple of years, is we can talk about Colin Kaepernick, who's actually from the Wisconsin area. And when he took a knee, I think the issue that we needed to address more than anything, and this is a issue of race, when has it become un-American to speak out against injustice? And my argument stands that it became more of a question when it was Black people speaking out against the injustices of this country, of the world. And so I took a very strong stance at that time and created a series of works. And the message was, especially to young people, you have every right as an American to speak out when you see injustice. And so I think that's the thing is like my work has been about, it's never been about, an artist will get caught up in the idea of trying to make a living or trying to make a lot of money. I've never been focused on making a lot of money. I've needed to make a living at this, but I felt it was more important for me to tell the story. And so my work has always been about telling a story. And part of that story is letting Black children know in particular that you are relevant. The idea that Black Lives Matter is I don't want to get this misunderstood, but it's so much bigger than Black Lives Matter. My position has always been that Black lives are very important. Black people have made a major contribution to this world, and we should not request a position of mattering. We should insist that we are acknowledged for our contributions and our continued contributions.
Wonderful. It sounds like Dr. King and civil rights and has played a really big role in your work, especially your civil rights collection. How did that whole project got started? How did it get started?
Which project?
The civil rights collection you did.
You know, I created a piece that was based on Ernest Wither took a picture during the 1968 in Memphis, Tennessee. And what it was the Streets and Sanitation Department, the Black men that were a part, and they were 98% of the garbage collectors in Memphis, Tennessee. And they were on strike because they weren't being treated fairly and they weren't being compensated fairly. And so they organized a strike. And so there's a famous photograph that Ernest Wither had taken of a bunch of Black men standing in a line, holding up a sign that says, "I am a man." And I've always looked at that photograph. And one day I just decided that I wanted to paint that photograph, but paint it in my own interpretation. But that led to me trying to find anything that was part of the civil rights movement and do an interpretation of it.
That's beautiful. So I know you have recently done the Teachers March, and I know you have a few more projects, and we're going to show some pictures soon of your work. But how did you get into illustrating books? I remember I was at Center Street Library, just starting out in reference work. And lo and behold, there was a Charly Palmer picture in the children's room. And I was like, oh my gosh, you should totally illustrate some books here. So awesome. So how did you get started?
You know what? The thing was that I have always been a lover of children's books. I have always been a lover of children's books. And it's not by coincidence that Ezra Scott Keyes, he wrote and illustrated a book called A Rainy Day. And I saw that book when I was 4 years old. And what I realized later on was that it spoke to me because prior to then, I'd never seen Black children illustrated in a positive light. And I see this little brown child that looked like me. And I saw this mother that looked like my mother. And that book was a book that I looked at over and over again. And at that point, I wasn't reading. And so I would just look at the pictures. And so what's really fascinating, and this is how the subconscious operates, after I started painting, I was very much influenced by Keith's work, to the point where patterns and texture and everything was very much a part of the signature of my work. And so 30 years later, seeing the book again, I'm like, that book influenced me for the rest of my life. And I loved his writing. I loved his representation of everybody. And so I've been collecting children's books again since I was about 25 years old. And so all I said was, you know what, God, give me an opportunity to get the right project. And so my first right project probably came about 3 years ago. And the book was Mama Africa, and it was a story of Mary Makeba. And so it was one of those books that her story was powerful, it was inspirational, and I could wrap my heart and my mind around it. And once I did that book, I was very much like, I want to do more of this. But what excited me the most about that book was the pay was well, the time was well. There had been projects that had come prior and they needed a lot in a little time. And I'm like, if I'm going to do this, I have to do it right. And so I absolutely need enough time to work it out and create my vision.
Awesome. Wow. I remember finding that on the shelf, and that was when I first noticed. I was like, wait a minute, that's Charly. It was on the shelf, and I was like, wait a minute, because I don't think I knew before you started that you were starting to illustrate books, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's my cousin.
Yeah.
Found you on the library shelf at King Library.
And I think that's the beauty of this journey for me is like knowing that I'm surprising people because I do have to promote myself to a certain degree and push, my brand, the idea of who I am, but I'm quiet and reserved in general. And so I just do my thing. And so there are times when perhaps I should promote, but I can't tell you how many times people have just been surprised when they've discovered my work somewhere. when it's come to the children's books, or it's been a movie or on TV or something like that. It's like I do it, and I do it quietly, and I try as much as possible to do it humbly.
That is so true. Okay, Paul, we're gonna bring up some of your images. Maybe you can share with us. Let me make sure. Yeah, bear with me. I'm new to this technology. All right, Paul, he has your images. He's going to show your images, and you can go through and kind of show us, narrate.
You can hold on that one for a minute. I mean, so that just so the people know, like a lot of major things happened in 2020. And I could talk a little bit about it. It started with Selena Gomez, manager, reaching out to me and requesting one of my images for a takeover. And so she wanted to dedicate, after the killing of George Floyd, she wanted to bring in authors and writers and address what's going on in the country right now, but mostly Black writers who are addressing race issues and everything. So they had contacted me and asked me if they could use one of the images to announce the takeover. Selena Gomez has something like 750 million followers. And so I'm like, why not? What happened in that is that it started to give me a lot more major exposure. I knew that in general, the audience that she has is not one that necessarily shares my interests, but I'm figuring anytime I can get exposure, great. But around that same time is when Sony had reached out to me and asked me if I would be interested in doing John Legend CD cover. And what was funny about that was that I literally they had reached out to me on April 1st. And a lot of you who don't remember, April 1st is April Fool's Day. And so when I first received that, it's like, that would be a really bad joke if somebody's playing with me. Let me reach them, find out what is going on, and see what they want to do. And it was really special to me, even the way Sony and the art director approached me, because it was more of one of these situations where they asked me if I would be interested in this, as opposed to announcing, Charlie, you have been assigned. And of course, I would have done it either way. But I also happen to be a huge fan of John Legend's music. And so what I love is that my wife and I had a chance to hear all the music before the world really had a chance to hear it. And so I listened to the music and immediately, again, fell in love with a lot of the music that was on the new CD, and could see immediately how that the image should be created. And so there's lots of layers of information in this particular piece that I'm holding of John Legend. And then there's the piece that's behind it. And that piece literally happened the month after that. And that was Time Magazine coming to me and saying, would you be interested in doing the cover for Time Magazine? And again, it's like, this is global national information. And I'm looking at all this and wondering how and why this is happening to me right now. But what I pause and always pause and do is acknowledge that there is a power greater than mine, and that between God and my ancestors, this has been a plan, and they have been preparing me for all of this for some time. And I think if this all happened to me earlier in my life, I probably would have gotten a little bit overly confident or cocky. But I think that I have received it. I have enjoyed it. And I feel truly honored and blessed to have had these opportunities.
Wow. Yeah, I remember when I first saw his album. I was like, wow, that sure looks familiar, that style. Should've known. And oh, I love the piece you did for Time Magazine. It is so awesome. I read the article a while back. So proud. So just, I'm just, wow. Just wow.
Thank you.
Paul, can we show some of those other images that Charlie sent? Okay, can you tell us about
Okay,
this
so
image?
I'm going to save that one, but keep that in mind, because that kind of is actually connected to what I shared with you earlier today, Joy. So I'm gonna close with that one, but let's see the next piece.
Okay.
Okay, see, that's one of my favorite pages from that book. But go to the next piece. Okay, so this is kind of jumping into what I really, so there will be a couple of images you'll see at the end that we actually put up there today. But my latest project, I just completed 2 other children books. One is called Keep Your Head Up. And then this one is called The Legend of Gravity. And it's the story of me growing up in Milwaukee and playing street basketball. And I created a fictional situation where there was a tournament called the Best of the Best. And so there's lots of scenes that you'll see, but it really is me going around and playing basketball on some of the different courts around the city. But I named some of the neighborhoods that I spent time in, Hillside and Park Lawn, but you'll also see other images along the way. But this is probably the book to date that I'm the most proud of, because not only did I illustrate it, but I also wrote it. And that's the difference when you're doing children books, is that often you come with the publisher comes with a manuscript. You read the manuscript, you do those sketches, and those are some of the early sketches you saw. And then you start doing the illustrations on that. And so these are pieces that are actually some of the finished illustration for a book that won't be coming out until September, called The Legend of Gravity.
Wow, we'll definitely have to promote that one. It's always fun to have books that are based on our local city, Milwaukee, and just to have that connection. It's so awesome. Paul, can we see some more of the images? All right, this is the time feature that we was
Yes.
talking about earlier. How did that
So
even get started? Like,
yeah, I think what's really beautiful about this, and that's why I could only give it to acknowledge again a higher source, is that when I spoke to the art director who was determining the cover for Time magazine, I assumed he had seen the John Legend work, because the John Legend work had just been announced. And so I asked him, and like, so you saw the John Legend album? And he was like surprised. And so he went online, he Googled Charly Palmer, John Legend, and there it was, the John. He said, "Oh my God, I didn't know anything about this." And I'm like, okay, this is acknowledgement that, again, you've been chosen because perhaps the hard work that you put into it. But when I talked to the art director for, his name is D.L. Pine, but when we talked about the cover here, he had seen early works that I had done, which I addressed earlier, what it had to do, it was a silent series that was inspired by Kaepernick taking a knee. And so he saw a vision of something similar to that look for the Time magazine cover. So it was absolutely an honor. I knew from the very beginning when I started to submit concepts who I wanted to use as a model. That's a little girl that I've used, I've painted several times in the past, named Linda. And I knew I wanted her to be a part of it. But the thing that has also been an ongoing theme throughout my work for the last 10 years, it's been flowers. And people often ask me, what are the flowers about? And the flowers actually are about my mother. And it's honoring my mother. The first time I started doing flowers was shortly after my mother passed away. But as an artist, I found it very difficult after she passed away to paint. And I think part of the challenge was that she was my biggest fan. She has always been that person that encouraged me, challenged me, asked questions, pushed me. And so when she was not there to do that, I kind of lost for a moment my drive. And so I think that what happened was I created a piece a year after she passed away called Not Enough Flowers. And what it was a little boy, probably a 8-year-old boy. He was holding a huge bouquet of flowers. And as I completed that piece, I suddenly realized that that piece represented me. And it represented a whole year of mourning the loss of my mother, where it's like I can give her flowers for the rest of my life, and it would never replace the emptiness in my heart. And so after that, the flowers became a part of so many pieces that I've created in the last 10 years.
Yeah, every time I've read that in the article, and I every time I see one of your pieces, I do think of, I know her as Aunt Irma, and she was your biggest fan because I can remember sitting at the table at any holiday, she was bragging about her son Charlie, and I remember I think she told us about the Coca-Cola project with the Olympics and so many great things you were working on, and she would share little nuggets of gold, wisdom, and how she really poured into her children and how successful they. And as a mother, I understand that now more than ever that you do have to pour into your children. And I know a lot of people are grieving and hurting, and I think it's wonderful that you found a way to um, transform it into a beautiful moment, beautiful image in your artwork. So every time I see the flowers, I see Aunt Irma too.
Well, thank you. I mean, I think that's really important. I think that people may not understand that. I think in the article, I even addressed the idea that I'm able to put in my interview, put my mother's name in Time magazine. That honestly was more important than anything because I still can't find enough flowers to show her how much I honor and appreciate and respect her and know that I am here because of her. Like one of my favorite quotes is by Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln said, "All that I am or will ever be, I owe to my mother." And I honestly, truly believe that.
Wonderful. Okay, Paul, let's go to the next slide.
So this is probably one of my more recent pieces. In fact, I just completed this piece probably 2 weeks ago. Again, incorporating flowers into everything, celebrating beautiful Black children, beautiful Black people. And I think that there are times, even when I'm doing color, that when I paint Black people, I have a tendency to paint them dark brown and sometimes blue-black. It's funny. It's like I did a project with the Green Bay Packers where they were putting about 28 of my paintings in Lambeau Field. And there was a painting, one of my Green Bay Packer heroes, his name was John Brockington, number 42. And when I had submitted the painting, the people that were looking at it were a little alarmed by his color, his skin tone. They felt he was too dark. And I was absolutely adamant about, no, John Brockington was very dark. Okay, I mean, like we call in our community, dark-skinned folks like that blue-black. And he was blue-black. And one of my highlights for that Packer project was John Brockington came to Lambeau Field and he took a picture in front of my painting. And I'm like, I was smiling like a little child. I was like, John Brockington is standing by I felt like a kid all over again, seeing him stand and even, hearing from his wife saying that he is so proud of this painting. And I'm like, I'm so proud that he's standing beside my painting. So it was really an honor, but I love doing dark-skinned Black people.
All right, next slide, Paul.
This is also a fairly recent piece. If we were to go back to even a John Legend piece, one of the things that happened to my wife and I was we spent a month in South Africa. And that was this time last year. We were actually there for the whole month of February. And in that time, amazing things happened as a journey to awareness and consciousness of how the ancestors are always there to provide. And not going even into too much of it when discussing John Legend, but like when we were in South Africa, I was doing things that I normally don't do. I was taking a lot of photographs of landscapes. We went to an art show, and I had been told several years ago that my work has a tendency to focus on America, and it's not universal. And so we had gone to an art show of African artists, and I turned to my wife, who was my fiance at the time, And I said that, Black is universal. And so the message always has to be that we're everywhere. And so the John Legend piece, if you go back to it, what you'll see is in his shoulder area, there is this beautiful red flower. This red flower is a potia, and that is the national flower of South Africa. And so when I saw it when we were in South Africa, I was so intrigued by it. I took several pictures of it. But if you look in John Legend's head, you'll see galaxies and you'll see stars, because we came back from that trip and we realized the universe is us and we are the universe. And so that was the message that I wanted to give over and over again. So what you see in this picture right here is the John Legend album, but the inside is actually a photograph of what's called the 12 Apostles, which is a valley in Cape Town. I took pictures of that, not knowing why I was taking pictures of that. The flower is there. And like when we were talking and we were on the phone, I was talking to John about the project, and I mentioned South Africa. And John said, "What part of South Africa?" I said, "Cape Town." And he says, "Cape Town is one of my favorite places to visit." He said, "But South Africa is actually my second best market in the world." And so everything that I was preparing for when I was in South Africa, literally the next month, I came back here and it was all there. And so it was like, again, they're saying, we are preparing you for this journey. And so all the material that I needed was there. So we go back to that other piece. Paul, if you could go back to that piece. So this is actually one of the submissions for the Time magazine cover, because when I started thinking about what was going on at the time with protest, it's like, what, I'm angry that I'm 60 years old and I'm looking at what's going on with our children, and their Black children are still in fear. They're still afraid that something might happen to them. And I thought that I would hope that we were past this. And the reality is that we are not. And so this statement is about, and Joy, you can kind of understand that because you kind of mentioned it earlier, is parents, what can we do to provide protection? And so you see the parents' hands are reaching to put that safety helmet on, but in that helmet, there is the universe. And then if you look at that beautiful, mask that's on her face, it's got flowers on it. So I was able to integrate the flowers in the narrative as well. And so it's a combination of all of that. So this story kind of tells that whole story about protection, love, family, Blackness.
Beautiful. And I just think it's so wonderful that you documented the mask wearing, because we're living in unprecedented times, and we've never seen the things that are happening happen before. And I think it's so important that we document this experience, because if we don't learn what we're doing now, we're doomed to repeat. So
Absolutely.
so important. It's such a beautiful piece. Paul, let's go to the next slide.
So this is a book that comes out again in March. It's called A Plan for the People, and it's about Nelson Mandela. And so this was also a really fun project. And this happened again prior to me going to South Africa on the first trip. No, I'm sorry. This is in between trips, because I had gone to South Africa before. But on this trip, I had actually, again, pulled research, gone to the museums when I was in South Africa. So telling this story was a joy. It was also it was allowing me to explore now something I had a little bit more knowledge about. And so it's kind of like, this is a sneak preview. This book, I do have the actual book, but it will be officially released next month.
Wow. I will be looking forward to getting that on our shelves. Paul, next, is there another slide? All right, we talked about that one. Is there anything else?
And just to give you an idea, this is the sketch for the Nelson Mandela book. And so if people wonder, where does it start? It starts with this is called a rough. And this takes me all of 5 or 6 minutes to do, but I sketch it out really quickly, and I might sketch out 6 or 7 of these and decide on which one I think would be most fitting for the actual drawing. Then I'll do a very tight drawing of the piece, and then once the art director approves of the tight drawing, I'll do the painting, and the painting is what you saw in that earlier slide.
Wow. Started the start of the beautiful work.
Yes.
Okay, so that must be the end of the slides. We're at 12:43. So I'm going to go through the chat and see what questions do we have. All right. Connie has Connie is on. Hello, Connie. Hi, Deidre. Okay. Let's see. Allie, Mr. Palmer, I'm a huge fan of your work, especially my rainy day rocket ship. It captures such excitement and creativity, but it's also a spectacular book for indoor times. Do you paint from life? Do you use reference images? Do you have a favorite medium?
Oh, that's a lot of questions. I like the questions though. All right, so yes, 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 and yes. I'm sorry. All right, so what's really beautiful is the main character in Rainy Day Rocket Ship is inspired by one of my grandsons and my second nephew, my niece's son. His name is Hudson. And then like the funny thing about like this particular story is there is a pug, and the pug appears in all the frames throughout the story. And it was kind of my way, because my wife, again, fiance at the time, was very much about, she really wanted a pug. And I thought maybe if I could buy some stuffed pugs and get pictures of a pug, we probably wouldn't have to buy a real pug. But so there are pugs throughout the whole story. And I didn't know anything about pugs, but Joy, I showed you earlier my guard dog. So
Aw.
we currently have a pug named Pugsley, who's almost 10 months old. And Pugsley's got a brother that's coming in a month and a half, named Blue. But so yes, I use reference on everything that I do. I use a medium of acrylic. I have to submit the pencils and sketches ahead of time. But what I love the most about also Rainy Day Rocket Ship is the idea that I don't think that children books about Black children have to be about race. And so what I thought was really important about Rainy Day Rocket Ship is this story is about a little kid who's stuck in a house on a rainy day. So it's about being creative and finding a way to have a good day. And so it's about having a good day on a rainy day. So he creates a rocket ship situation at home. And so it's not about being Black, it's about being a child. And those books always intrigue me. And those are the ones I get the most excited about. So I think I answered all the questions, reference and medium and everything. Very good question.
Yeah, that was another one of my questions, but we're running out of time, so I'm gonna get through the chat. All right, let's see. Sandra said, so powerful and beautiful. And there's a lot of agreeing. Eva said, state of emergency is so powerful. Cecilia Gore said, beautiful tribute to Mrs. Irma Walker. Thank you. I have Sweeter the Berry, a gift from the YMCA, thanks to Irma. XOXO. All right.
Hey, Cecilia.
Here's a comment. I love this art piece. All right. Let's see. You have reached such heights with your art and crossed over so many mediums of expression. My question is, What's next for you, Mr. Palmer?
Oh, that's a really good question. So right now, Gravity's done. So in movie terms, it's in the can. And Keep Your Head Up is in the can. Those are both completed. I am sketching on a book called, it's called Evicted. It's about the tent city and the sharecroppers that were kicked out of their homes when they wanted to fight for the rights to vote. And I'm trying to think, and I'm also just getting ready for 2 art exhibits. So I have a show called The Power of Be. That's the word BE in words starting with B. So beginning, becoming, beyond, and there's a series of paintings that I'm doing in that show. And then that leads to a second show. The second show is called Departure. And Departure is what's called a retrospective show, where it starts from the very beginning of my career to now, and it ends with Africa to Be, and it incorporates a piece from the B series.
All right. I'm so happy to be learning about the great work of Charly Palmer. Thank you, Joy and Charlie, for this presentation. That was from Joan Johnson, our director.
Thank
Next
you,
question.
Joan.
Do you like any type of media in particular?
I absolutely love acrylic. You know, I'm going to be, because I'm on vacation for the next week and a half, I'm going to play with watercolor again. It's a medium that I enjoy playing with, but my medium of choice is acrylic.
Yeah, your artwork usually is very vivid and very colorful and very deep.
Yeah, I love color. That's the thing about it. I love playing with color.
Okay, next question is, what is pain and joy to you? Do you use both when you create?
You know, that's a very good, I love that question. All right, so a lot of creative people use pain or sadness to create. I'm not one of them. I am not very creative when I'm sad. I'm not very creative when I'm hurting. Uh, and so I don't use that as a tool for creating. I create most perhaps when I'm angry, or if I feel I have something to say, or perhaps when I'm feeling a lot of love. That's when the best work comes out, is when I'm feeling a great deal of love. So for me, when you ask the question, what is joy? I say without a doubt, joy is in the studio just watching what happens. And my cousin, Joy, Joy is in the studio just watching what happens. And if you're a reader, and I hope a lot of you are and will continue to be readers, it's like reading a really good book and you don't know what the outcome is going to be. And so I kind of look at that and say, like, I wonder where this book is going. Or in this case, I wonder where this piece of artwork is going. I may be very experienced at painting, but there are times when I have to let the spirit lead me. And that becomes one of those exciting journeys for me.
Awesome. Okay, Allie, the kids in story time love looking for the pugs. So that must be in My Rainy
Yeah.
Day rocket ship.
Rainy day. Yeah.
All right. Also, I love you. Somebody loves you.
Okay, thank you.
Do you offer training programs for youth who have inspirations in the art? How can we market to get your Black books in more schools?
I think that would be probably a Joy question to answer. Yeah, one of the things that I am doing, I don't know if I mentioned to you, Joy, but my wife and I helped to develop what's called the Irma Foundation. And with the Irma Foundation, we are going to be working to get funding to to locate gifted children in whatever that might be, dance, computer, music, art, and find ways to finance them pursuing their dreams. Only because it's like that was an experience that I had as a young person. where there were times my mom could not afford for me to take certain classes. And like, I don't want that to be a reason that we can't find the next James Baldwin, or we can't find the next Charly Palmer, if that's the case, or the next Steve Jobs or Bill Gates, because we have some beautiful, amazing geniuses out there that need to be nurtured and need to be directed. And so that becomes a very important part. So I look at like even my space in Atlanta, and I have a lot of room, not a lot of room for workshops that I intend to do even for young adults and professional artists at some point, and bring them in and give them everything that I've been taught and what I've learned. Because that's something that my mom has always taught me, and that is to pass it forward. And that is a desire, a want, is I want to pass what I know forward.
That'd be wonderful. There are so many young people who could really benefit from an opportunity to develop their talents. And we see a lot of those children. Well, we used to see a lot of those children in the library. And I'm looking forward to them coming back. But it's so important to develop those talents and provide opportunities. That's wonderful, and I look forward to hearing more about that.
You know, you
All
saying
right.
that, that actually triggers something. I remember as a child, when we were old enough, and we lived only probably a mile away from the library downtown. And so my brothers and I would walk over there and spend a whole day sitting and looking at and reading books when we lived in Hillside. And so I completely forgot about that memory until you said what the kids that came into or come into your space.
I say all the time, we never know who is in our building. The children that come and spend, lots of time, we are mentoring them, introducing books to them, new opportunities, programming. I've been working for the library for 20 years, plus or minus.
Oh,
And I've seen I have so many children in the library that I have like raised. So
uh-huh.
I totally get that. And I was wondering if you were a library child. I better not say a kid, Mr. Herrera will kill me. But so many young people come to the library, and I'm so glad that Irma made sure you guys went to the library too. All right, let me get back to the chat because I'm running out of time. Mr. Palmer, would you ever consider making some of your artwork into jigsaw puzzles? There has been a rise in Black-owned jigsaw puzzle companies that exclusively features Black artists in their collections in recent years, many based in ATL even. I would love to get my hands on a puzzle of your work. Let me scoot down.
That's a really good question. I have considered it. I've been offered that a couple of times. It would be something I'd have to think about a little bit, because there's also a concern about taking my work, and especially very personal work, and making it into puzzles, and sometimes even making it into prints. If it's really personal, sometimes I only want the one and only original.
Okay. All right. Let me get back through the chat. All right, here we are. Is there going to be a special release of the Legend of Gravity for here in Milwaukee?
I can make that happen. I think, again, I would hope that we're in a space where we're no longer concerned about social distance, but it would be an excuse for me to come to Milwaukee. And Joy, we can probably work out something where I could even talk to my publisher about having some books sent to the library or something like that, and do a signing, or we could figure something out, because it's something that's typically done with new releases. And so I'll look into that.
Awesome. We're down to 2 minutes. Let's see. Where can we find a collection of all your work?
If we're talking originals, you can go to my website, which is, Charly, Charly. I think it's charlypalmer.com. I don't know. I haven't gone in a while. But if you Google Charly, Charly, Palmer.com, I think that's my website. And that's where you would see some of my work. But if you're talking books, and I think, again, you'd almost have to Google it. Because I work with 5 different publishers. And so they're not all coming from one publisher.
Okay, Paul, if you could drop that website into the chat for me, please. Okay. Your family is so proud of you and love you very much. That must be, I can't see the full name, but I'm wondering if that's Connie. Other than special events, Packer art, time stuff, John Legend, what do you dream of things to draw, or what do you get up and just, let's see, stable, then get inspired artwork? So I think the question is about being inspired.
That's an easy one. It's like, first of all, it's very difficult for me to shut it down. I'm always inspired. I'm always thinking. Like, again, we're on vacation for a week and a half now, and I want to paint and draw every day, and I'm trying to be still for a little bit. But I love beautiful brown faces. Black children in particular just inspired me. I look at a face and I know I want to paint it. I know I want to draw it. And so I have to ask myself at times when I look at these faces, how do I want to interpret it? But there's an ongoing desire to create and tell our story. And so I'm never out of ideas. I'm never out of ideas.
Thank you, Charly. I appreciate everything. I am so overjoyed. This was a wonderful conversation. I'm glad we had this on Martin Luther King Day. It's a different reality. Usually our building is filled with people, and I'm running to the mic, and I'm running here, and I'm running there, and I'm sitting in the building, and then there's like nobody here. But this was a wonderful conversation, and I wanted to say thank you for making this such a excellent start off event.
Well, thank you, Joy, for the opportunity. Thank you, Joan. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Milwaukee, because of you, I am. And so I want to tell everybody that my inspiration comes from where I came from, and Milwaukee's a part of that. So thank you all for this opportunity.